Hey everybody, this is Matthew Soltesiak and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast. Using my sportscasting background, I speak with a variety of guests and interview key players to gain more insight on what makes this team go. As the Detroit Lions enter a new gritty era, we'll look beyond just the kneecaps when it comes to the analysis. Welcome to another episode. In this episode, we take a look back at the Detroit Lions' Week 6 victory against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We discuss that 20-6 win. We'll touch on what went well, turning points in the game, concerns or takeaways, and any major storylines coming out of this contest. Let's get to it, Lions fans.
Hey, this is Rob Rubik. Stay tuned for more great insight from This Is Not the Same Old Lions podcast.
I'm joined today by James Cook, senior sports writer for the Traverse City Record Eagle. You can also hear him on the Get Around podcast. It drops on Monday. James, as always, it is good to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
And it's even better to have you here after Detroit Lions victory. Now, as we get into this, just a reminder to the listeners, please hit the subscribe or like button. It is helping us build momentum, just like the Detroit Lions are building momentum. And James, we got to start by talking about what we liked. This is going to be a pretty big category. The Lions won 20-6. We got to like that, right?
Well, yeah, of course. Yeah, defense looked amazing. They kept a team with a pretty good group of skill players, with wide receivers and Rashad White at running back. Baker Mayfield seems to kind of have rejuvenated himself a little bit this season, and they were able to hold them just to 2 field goals, 6 points total. So that's a great effort.
Yeah, anytime you can hold a team without a touchdown, and then when you do it on the road, I guess the first thing is that defense. Let's probably start with the front 7. They gave up just 46 yards rushing in this game. And it felt like that pressure up front really helped the back end of our defense, because with Baker Mayfield being under pressure, there's a few plays he left out there. He was off target. There were some receivers that could have had some huge gains if the ball was just 2 to 3 yards in a different spot.
Yeah. The defense just as a whole, the front line, like you said, they only got 1 sack on the day, but they forced Mayfield to throw earlier than he wanted to a lot. He had to make some throws that, weren't from the right platform that he wanted to throw from, that kind of stuff, and just kind of kept them off balance a lot in that game. Julian Okwara with the only actual sack of the game, but we saw pretty consistent pressure and guys just when they were getting pressure, getting the hand up and batting down those passes like the Bugs one that led to a pick.
That was huge, and it wasn't just huge because of the interception, but by Bugs deflecting that. You probably saw on the replay, I think it was Mike Evans. That guy might have been gone for 90 yards and a touchdown.
Yeah, he was pretty well open. Yeah, and it would have been a big gainer if not. Yeah, like you said, potential score for them.
So that was huge. And then if we look at our secondary a little bit, they had some huge plays as well, even though there were some spots where the receivers looked like they might have been able to make some plays. Man, Jerry Jacobs busted through a block and made a tackle for a loss on a screen. There's another play where Cam Sutton made the nice open field tackle for no gain. And they held Tampa to 2 for 12 on third down. That is an amazing success rate for getting the other team off the field.
Yeah, the third down defense was great, especially after the first couple of drives. They had a streak there, I think, of 6 drives or 6 third downs in a row where they didn't allow Tampa Bay to convert. So, that if you can do that consistently in the NFL, that's just money in the bank.
Well, and we also knew the defense was going to have to play well in this game, because Tampa, they might give up yards like Carolina does, but they don't give up touchdowns like the Panthers. And so we knew scoring touchdowns was not going to be easy in this game. So that was huge. And so that takes me over to the offense. And let's start with Jared Goff. We have to not like, but maybe love the way this guy played. He threw for 353 yards and had 2 touchdowns. And we've talked about how well the Lions have been balanced between running and throwing the ball, and that's really nice. But it's also nice to see the Lions can win through the air if the ground game isn't going.
Yeah, and they were just like Tampa Bay. They were not able to get their ground game going, especially after David Montgomery left the game with apparently a rib injury and didn't return. So he's going to have an MRI tomorrow to see how how bad that is, but the reports were that there was no breaks. They did X-rays, and the X-rays didn't reveal any breaks or anything like that. So that's good. So I mean, when he originally went down, I thought it was maybe a shoulder. I thought he landed awkwardly on that shoulder, but it turns out it was the ribs. But yeah, once they did get a couple of plays here and there from the running game after he went out, but not very consistently, and they kind of just had to rely on the pass game, and then they were still successful with that. I mean, Goff's stats were pretty great.
Yeah, you can't, and those stats do not exist if you don't have some great pass protection. And Jared Goff gave credit where credit's due. Listen to him right here.
I thought those guys are protecting their tails off right now and giving me plenty of time to see everything. And when that's the case, we got good players down the field. We were able to make plays. And I can't give those guys enough credit up front right now for, I know Graham's been a player in this league for a long time, but stepping in after Big V went down, and then obviously Yodi stepping in after Jonah went down, and then playing the way they've played, it's been huge for us offensively.
You already talked about this. Knowing our top running backs were out of the game, how impressed were you with all the time Goff had to throw, even though there wasn't a real threat of a running game?
Yeah, I mean, he took 3 sacks, which is probably the most he's taken this season. But still, yeah, for being a one-dimensional offense after Montgomery left, no Gibbs. So I was amazed that they only got there 3 times, kind of, to be honest. And then he was 30 for 44 passing, 353 yards, no picks, which is good to see after he had that string of a couple of games in a row with a pick and 2 touchdowns. So, a pretty good 107.5 QB rating.
Yeah, and when he's able to throw the ball and spread it around, I believe it was like 10 different pass catchers in the game. And, obviously we have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who somebody already coined this phrase. We should call him Amon-Ra first down, because he had 12 catches, 124 yards, and a touchdown. That guy is amazing, but everybody else stepped up as well. Even if they didn't step up 5, 7, or 12 plays like St. Brown, it could have been 1 play or 2 play, but some of those were critical plays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you had Josh Reynolds coming through with some big plays. I like how they noted during the broadcast that one of his catches that went only for 9 yards was his first catch of the season that wasn't either for a first down or a touchdown.
That was pretty impressive. I did not know that stat, but I heard it as well. And it just goes to remind people how good of a role Josh Reynolds plays, even if you're not always aware of it.
Mm-hmm. And we saw a little bit of Marvin Jones in this game. That's nice to see. They went to Sam Laporta a lot, but weren't able to convert a lot to him. I think that the Tampa Bay defense was really determined to take that away. I think they were like, well, I don't think we can take away Amon-Ra St. Brown. Maybe we can concentrate on taking away Sam Laporta because we have the good coverage linebackers to do it. I mean, and Levante David and Devin White both played excellent for Tampa Bay.
Yeah, their defense is for real.
And covering Laporta, they were lights out.
Yeah, and even that Marvin Jones, that was a 3rd down play where he made that catch, and that kept the chains moving. It's just pivotal plays like that. Another thing I got to say I liked our 3rd quarter. I mean, we were up 10-3 at the half, and 3rd quarters have been tough for the Lions. They didn't score on the first drive. They missed a long field goal, but it wasn't off by much, and it had the distance. But the Lions outscored Tampa 7-3 in the quarter, taking a 17-6 lead into the 4th. So that's got to be a win, right? This has to be considered in the improvement category, James.
Yeah, and I think they kind of, with that field goal, like you said, it had the distance. So that's got to kind of be a relief too. Everybody was questioning Patterson's leg strength and if he can hit those field goals over 50 yards, but he had the leg on that. It was just a little bit to the right.
And then I guess if there's another thing you got to like about this game is that time of possession. When you have the ball 36 and a half minutes, and the other team 23 and a half, if they don't have the ball, there's a less chance they're going to score. And if they're on the field more than you, their defense is going to get tired. That's a really impressive stat.
Yeah, especially considering that they didn't, they still ran the ball, just not effectively. 20 carries for 44 yards, so less than 2 yards a carry. But that runs time off the clock. They were ahead. They could do that. They used it to set up play action, which was pretty effective in that game with Jared Goff. We noted his pass completion earlier. So the running game did help. It just wasn't effective on paper if you look at the statistics.
That makes a lot of sense. Yes, I agree with you. It helped. It might not have jumped off the page like anybody thought it would, but it was existent enough to play a role. And folks, there's a couple other things that we really liked in this game, but we're going to save them a little bit later because we consider those pivotal moments, and we're going to elaborate quite a bit there. So, James, I mean, we won 20-6 on the road. The team did not allow a touchdown. Is there anything you did not like or any concern you have?
Well, the Montgomery injury, I think, is maybe one of the big things. Obviously they're hoping they have both Montgomery and Gibbs back next week, but at least maybe Gibbs if Montgomery misses some time here. So that running back depth is something, although Devine Ezigbo looked okay in a limited run there. And Craig Reynolds had his moments.
I would agree with you on that. I thought the David Montgomery injury is probably the biggest concern. Obviously, it's something you didn't like either. I think this continued to emphasize his importance to the running game. And obviously, like you said, with Jahmyr Gibbs being out, I mean, that also helped. But listen, let's understand something. Tampa has a great defensive line. They're one of the better rushing defenses in the league already. So it's not a shock that we didn't run for a lot of yards. But David Montgomery is really important to this offense.
Yeah, I think you've seen exactly how important he is in the games that he's missed and the times that he's left games because of injuries. That the offense just seems to really be humming when he's going. Man, Amon-Ra St. Brown picked up the mantle right there. I mean, 12 catches, 124 yards, touchdown, 12 catches out of 15 targets, so too. So I mean, he was putting some work in. It was basically an extension of the running game. Those short passes to St. Brown and those passes over the middle. Yeah, well, those linebackers were covering Laporta, determined to take him away out of the game, and that middle was open for St. Brown.
I felt like that might have been something Ben Johnson schemed, knowing that, hey, if the running game's not that effective, what can we do to mimic it without exactly doing it? So I don't have any other concerns coming out of this. I'm going to probably talk about the coaching later because that wasn't a concern. That was a compliment. I saw enough football this weekend and saw a lot of not so smart moves, but I saw a lot of smart moves by the Detroit Lions. So let's talk about some turning points or pivotal moments. I think the first pivotal moment, well, you could talk about the deflected pass on the first drive that leads to a field goal for the Lions. But let's move into the second quarter of the game. David Montgomery had gone down with an injury. It's 3rd down and 10, and it's a tie game. And there is a pass to Amon-Ra St. Brown over the middle, one of the ones you talked about. This was for 5 or 6 yards. And he could have just gone right up the middle, but he didn't. He went to the sideline. He went down the sideline, got some huge help from Craig Reynolds. Amon-Ra St. Brown talked about it after the game. Here's how St. Brown describes what happened.
We had a call on, and he checked out of it. I think they were bringing pressure or whatnot. They were doing it basically all game, but he checked out of it. Had like a little choice route. I broke in, and they teach us to catch and knife, which means catch and get upfield and get as many yards as you can. I caught it, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna cut across the field. I'm gonna try to score. So I cut across, boom, and I see 24, and I'm like, I see Craig come out of nowhere, and I like kind of point at 24, and Craig just comes zooming, boom, lights him up. And he's the reason why I scored. Man, I give hats off to Craig. It was a huge block, but it was fun, man. It was a big play for us, and I'm just glad. I mean, we teach blocking after the catch so much, and it showed up big time for us when we needed it most. So hats off to Craig, man.
Now, James, that play was just incredible. I mean, did you see how far out of the play or maybe behind the play that Craig Reynolds was? And the fact that he didn't take the play off is the reason the Lions got into the end zone.
Yeah, and you saw the TV guys say that, that he's one of those glue guys, and that's what he does, And I think I saw one of the beat writers tweet and said, like, that's MCDC right there. Like, that's a Dan Campbell player. And yeah, he just came flying out of nowhere, was way behind the play, and then just obliterates the one guy who had a legit shot at getting St. Brown and probably had him dead to rights, and just takes him right out of the play. And then St. Brown hurdles the last one to get in the end zone.
I backed it up and watched it again, and I pointed out to my wife, I said, look at that guy way up here. He's going to come down and make a play later here. Like, I was blown away by the effort. Because you're right. I mean, it goes back to probably what we heard at Hard Knocks last year, right? When they said Craig Reynolds is this guy who gives you everything. And they talked about, I think it was even Deuce Staley saying, you got to keep this guy on the team. And so that was amazing, that effort. You're right. That sprung it. I didn't even realize St. Brown had a touchdown in that play. I was just thrilled that he got down to the 7-yard line. I thought he got knocked out of bounds. But also St. Brown knowing he needed 10 yards and he wasn't content just saying, I'll take 6 and go down. He tried for all 10 and got some, and he read his blocks. And so that play was the total team effort.
Yeah. And then and if you looked on Twitter right after that too, like there was so many tweets about a block. Which you don't often see. Somebody tweeted that like this is the block of the year so far in the NFL.
Well, that's 2 weeks in a row we've heard about a block being pretty big for the Lions. And so, you know what? Blocking matters, kids. So if you're out there and you're not with the ball in your hand, you're helping the guy in the hand get to the end zone. So let's go to another pivotal moment. Let's go to the third quarter, right? The Lions were leading 10-6 in the third, and it was 3rd and long, I believe. And if Tampa Bay gets the stop here, they get the ball back and maybe get some momentum. And on this drive, on first down, Jared Goff underthrew Jameson Williams. He came back to the ball. It hit him, but he dropped it. It was an underthrown ball. And then Sam Laporta drops the next one. And I turned to my wife and I said, that drop, oh, great. We're going to hear about this because Jameson Williams has a reputation for drops. But there it was on 3rd down and long. A 45-yard throw by Jared Goff to connect with Jameson Williams. Here's Jared's account of the play.
Yeah, it was good. It was a great catch by him. Probably not a great throw, but a great catch, and that's what is good when as a quarterback when you can miss a throw a little bit and a guy's able to make a play like that for a touchdown. It doesn't get much better, but yeah, pretty simple concept there. He was the top shelf of it, and the corner kind of bit the sail to Saint, and nobody there. I threw a little better ball. It might look a little bit better, but he made a great play.
So, James, how big was this play, and what are your takeaways from it?
Well, it's got to be big for Jameson Williams' confidence, which is something you had to wonder about, given all the questions about the drops and everything with him. That play before that, I think that was the one. I don't know if I would even characterize it as a drop. It was an underthrown ball because Goff, I think a defensive lineman either got a hand on it or made Goff. It was kind of a lame duck because of the way Goff had to throw it because he had pressure right in his face.
Yeah, it was not a good throw.
Yeah. I don't think it was necessarily Goff's fault. I think that was about as good as he could do with. I think he had Kalijah Cansey right in his face or something.
Right.
And but yeah, that touchdown was a game changer. It was what everybody hopes Jameson Williams brings to this team, which is the guy who takes the lid off the defense and you could just tell him to just sprint, beat your guy, and get a touchdown. And that's kind of what he did. I mean, even that ball was a little underthrown. I mean, he had to turn around and kind of wait for it a little bit, and that gave the defensive back a chance to make a play, but the DB never looked back for it. Which if you had a DB who was playing that a little bit better, maybe he gets it. But the DB never played the ball. He was always had his eyes on Williams all the way down the field.
Well, and that's it. Jameson Williams had to locate the ball. He had to turn. He was looking to his right, then he's looking to his left. And I'm like, oh, great, this is not going to end well. But then he makes the catch, and it was not an easy catch to make either. And it changed the game, and it could start changing the conversation about Jameson Williams either. And punting the ball being up 10-6 versus kicking off being up 17-6 is a big difference in this game.
Yeah, and that was a good catch, like you said. I mean, the DB did get a hand in there, got a hand on the ball, and he had to still haul it in and then survive the ground as well. That was an impressive catch for Williams.
Yeah, even Coach Campbell talked about it after the game.
Yeah, I think that'll certainly help. That was. Thought he did a great job turning on the gas, getting the back pylon. I love that Goff let it go. He saw it, he trusted it, and ripped it. And and he did a good job tracking that ball and making a huge play. And so I think that's going to help his confidence. And listen, that's one. It was good. It was good.
And it was a great catch for Williams. And you know what? It could, like you said, build his confidence. It could be the beginning of something going forward. Again, we don't need him to make 12 of those every game. We do not need him to be Amon-Ra St. Brown. They've got their different roles. But this was big. And man, a lot of people who have been on his back, hopefully this gets him a little bit of a reprieve from that, because he made a big play for the team when the team needed it. All right, James, let's look at some major storylines coming out of this game. Let's start with the crowd showing up. About half the crowd, it has been reported, may have been Detroit Lions fans. And after the game, even Coach Campbell talked about it.
The fans that travel with us and that show up at the stadium, I feel like every game there's more and more that are showing up. And I mean, we got into this game there at the end with up 2 scores, and they, Tampa's offense is out there on the field, and I feel like they're about to have to go into silent cadence at their own place. And that's saying something about the support you have from the fans. So listen, it's a good feeling, it's a good vibe. I can tell you our players and coaches noticed it. We noticed it, but when we walked out today, start the game, it was like, look at all the blue, and you could hear them.
Even Alex Anzalone said he hasn't seen anything like this. James, how cool is it to see Lions fans traveling like this?
It's pretty impressive. I mean, games in Florida tend to be almost, there's not a home field advantage anyway, because all the retirees there come to see their team. So it's not a surprise that there was a lot of Lions fans, but there was also a lot, obviously, who traveled for the game too. Like I remember going years ago to I was on vacation in Florida and went to a Detroit Red Wings Tampa Bay Lightning game, and the stadium was 2/3 red. Like it was ridiculous how much it was Red Wings and not Lightning people there and everything. But the Lions fans did traveled again, hung around again after the game, like at the Lambeau game, I think it was, or the Chiefs game, and people made note of that again too.
You're exactly right. I think you may have hit something with that Red Wings comment, because a year ago I was out in Seattle and went to a Red Wings Kraken game, and I'd say almost half that stadium, or at least a third of that stadium, was probably Red Wings fans, and the Kraken have a really good following. And so we know how many Red Wings fans come out to games around the country, and we got to believe most of those Red Wings fans are probably Lions fans. And so we may have some pockets of fans that are ready. I mean, I went to the Stanley Cup Finals in 1997 out in Washington, D.C., and I think it was Game 3. There were a ton of Red Wings fans out there. So we might be having a little bit of support on the road, and it's good to see. And that also helps, because even if you don't dominate with the crowd, it helps take their crowd out of it so they don't have that home field advantage. It at least neutralizes it. Mm-hmm. James, one other thing I want to note, the Lions did not go for it once on 4th down, not once. And so I think that's just another great aspect of the coaching. I think they didn't go for it if they didn't feel there was a need for it, and they were content to play, I don't want to call it more traditional football, but they were looking at the game, and I think it just reinforces that people think they're just ultra aggressive, and they might be, but they're not stupid aggressive. They're calculated aggressive.
Yeah, it was on the road, so I think that might have played a little bit into not being as aggressive and going for it on 4th down, figuring that you already have some disadvantages of playing on the road. Maybe not try to manufacture some for yourself. But they didn't go for it on 4th down. They punted in some situations when I think if they were at home in games, or if it was earlier in games, they might have gone for it. But I think that they were confident enough that they had a lead, and they were confident enough in their defense that they were like, well, I don't know that we need to go for it on 4th down here.
Well, James, we're coming out of this victory. The Detroit Lions are 5-1. Let's talk NFC North and maybe even NFC for a moment. The storyline has to be at 5-1. Green Bay was on a bye this week. Minnesota beat Chicago. So the Lions have like a 2.5 game lead on the Packers, the current tiebreaker as well. Minnesota moves to 2-4. So the division is still looking the same way it did a week ago, basically. How are you feeling about the NFC North right now?
Oh, the division looks pretty darn good. None of those teams are playing particularly well. Minnesota's given up more points than they've scored, even though they're 2-4, but their negative point differential. Chicago is a massive negative point differential, and Green Bay is exactly even in point differential. The Lions are plus 55. So there's a big spread there, as well as the wins and losses in the standings. And that point differential actually is second in the whole NFC behind the 49ers.
That is awesome. That's amazing to see how much in command the Lions are of their division. And Coach Campbell talked about it after the game about what it's going to take to keep things going like this, because when you start getting that big lead early, it could make people think, okay, things are wrapped up, but we have a lot of season to go. Here's what Coach Campbell said it's going to take to keep them going.
I've been fortunate to be on some teams that this is what you do, and it doesn't always work this way, but I know this. Good teams find a way to win consecutive games, and we're in it now. We were able to win more than 2 in a row, and we're kind of going. And all you can do is continue to put in the work and make an emphasis on cleaning up all the things that we didn't do well today, and then get ready for the next one. And you take it where it comes, man. You just you go. And as long as we stay hungry and there's still an urgency and an emphasis on doing your job, playing at a high level, none of us get complacent or start feeling really good about it to where you back off a little bit, you let off the gas just a little bit, then hey, we just keep going.
And people are starting to take notice here, and Amon-Ra St. Brown weighed in on it too, because questions are starting to come at him about where things can go this season.
Last year we started off I think 1-6 or something like that, so kind of flipped the opposite way, but to start off 5-1 is huge for us. But for us, I think we take it 1 week at a time. So we're going to celebrate this win, but as soon as this next week approaches, we're on to the next game, on to Baltimore. But we put so much focus into each week and so much preparation, and to come out with a victory, it feels really good. But we know, man, we have bigger goals ahead of us. We want to keep doing what we're doing, and we want to get to the playoffs. We want to have home field advantage for the playoffs. So there's so many things that we want to accomplish this year. But man, it's just a start for us. We got to keep going.
So James, let's look at the NFC as a conference. You talked about the division with the North, and there were some big outcomes today. Let's talk about those. What did you see there?
Yeah, with the 49ers and the Eagles losing today, the Lions are at 5-1, tied with those teams and a couple others for the best record in the NFL. So, I think it was during one of the post-game shows, I think it was Chris Sims said that he declared the Lions Super Bowl contenders. He said he would never would have thought he would hear himself saying that, but that's what he said.
And that's 6 weeks into the season, somebody's saying that about the Detroit Lions. And so, yeah, they're in a 3-way tie for the best record in the conference. Oh, by the way, did you notice another critical team lost? Seattle, a team that has a tiebreaker over us. So they dropped to 3-2. And again, we have a long way to go, but through 6 weeks, man, it's not just the record that makes me feel good. We've seen the Lions start 5-1 before. But my question, without looking at the record, or records aside, I mean, records count, but are the Lions in the same tier as Philly and San Francisco, James?
I think they're definitely putting themselves in that conversation to be in that mix, especially if Christian McCaffrey's injury turns out to be something more than missing, just a game or so or something. I think you are looking at that. I mean, they're even with them in the standings, and the Lions do have a pretty, I don't know about favorable schedule, but it's manageable the rest of the way. I mean, next week is a really good game against Baltimore Ravens, who are 4-2 and leading their division. Things are definitely looking good and looking up.
Well, yeah, with San Francisco losing to Cleveland and the Jets beating Philadelphia today, it showed that those teams are human. They're not machines, and they can be beat. And they weren't beat by teams that you were looking at as juggernauts right now, which again reminds us anything can happen on any given week in the NFL. I agree with you. The Lions have put themselves in the conversation, and that's probably all that matters, is that they're in the conversation. You don't win a playoff game in week 6 or 7 or 8. Every game matters because you want to get into the playoffs, And as Coach Campbell said, you don't need to have a meteoric rise. You just need to steadily increase throughout the season. And so the Lions could not really be in a better position than any fan would have asked for before the season started. James, you talked about the schedule, and you're right. How many times have we gone into the season hearing the Lions are going to have one of the easier schedules in the season, and then they turn out having like one of the top 5 most difficult schedules on the season? And right now, like you said, it's not favorable, but it's not indomitable. It's pretty neutral compared to some of the other teams.
Yeah, and before this week's games, I think it was the one of the toughest schedules in terms of the records of all of the other teams that you've played this season combined. The ones that they've already played.
That makes sense. Yeah, they have not had an easy start to the season with the records of some of the teams they played. You're right. You had Kansas City on the road. You had Green Bay on the road. You had Atlanta, who had a really good record, and you had Seattle. Those are four great opponents right there. And so it's kind of nice to get those up early. And if you look at the later half of the schedule, it's not as formidable. So it's just nice to know that, hey, maybe some things have balanced out for the Lions with the schedule.
Yeah, certainly hope so. I mean, they've got to be looking ahead to that Baltimore game, that Chargers game, and the Dallas game towards the end of the season as being their 3 toughest ones remaining, at least as far as right now.
Yeah, and we know you can lose any game. We saw it today. Asked some teams today how they felt if they thought they were going to lose their game when they were probably favored by a good amount. The Lions are 5-1. They have 2 games before the bye, at Baltimore, at home against the Raiders. Most people would say the Baltimore game looks formidable. The Raiders game looks winnable. And if you're 6-2 at the bye, you've got to be happy, right?
I would say so.
James, we're just about to get out of here, just about to wrap things up. Did you have any final thoughts, any comments, any things you wanted to share?
Just some guys on the defense who stood out. John Kaminsky was like his normal self. He was pushing linemen into the backfield, collapsing the pocket. We got some production from Levi Onwuzurike in this game, which is encouraging. And you saw really good games from Alex Anzalone and Jack Campbell at linebacker. The safeties who are playing now have been great. With Tracy Walker and Will Harris being kind of pushed into more expanded roles than was expected for them, and they both played pretty well this week. Will Harris, I think, got one penalty, but it was kind of ticky-tack.
Yeah, I agree with you on that penalty call. I thought that was pretty ticky-tack myself. Another thing of interest that I noticed was, if I'm not mistaken, his name was Coyote Oshika. He started at left guard for Jonah Jackson. They left Graham Glasgow at right guard, and Vaitai was active but on the bench. Did you notice that?
Yeah, that was. I was wondering at first. I was like, is that Vaitai at left guard instead of right guard, which is what they've normally played him at. But yeah, they've liked him. He was a guy that they gave some run in a couple of games late in the season last year. He kind of struggled a bit, but he's one of those project linemen who has a lot of upside. Kind of like Obina Easy, except for he's, I think, played himself more into playing time, obviously, than Easy has at this point in his career. So he was a guy that they had their eyes on, that they liked coming in last season when they brought him in, kind of midway through the season when he became available, and they've liked him. So, hey, more depth on the offensive line is always good.
It sure is. And they even had Dan Skipper in there in the game today as an extra offensive lineman. And so they're all about protecting the quarterback. And we have seen time and time again how well Jared Goff and the offense does when the offensive line does what they do.
And I think the Lions defense is I think it's as well set up to play a Lamar Jackson team as any. You've got linebackers, you got defensive backs who are willing to tackle, which is not necessarily the case on other teams. And so I think that they can play against a Lamar Jackson team.
That'll be interesting to see, because that will be a whole nother level of a quarterback and a whole nother test. James, amazing start to this season. Lions moved to 5-1. They're going to head east next week to take on that very tough competitor in the Baltimore Ravens. Thanks for joining the show again, James.
Yeah, no problem.
And folks, thank you so much for tuning in. You can find all the episodes at notthesameoldlions.com. If you're listening on YouTube, please hit that like button. And while you're at it, tell your friends about the show and please subscribe regardless of your listening platform. Until next time, stay gritty, my friends.